Summertime is just around the corner, so as the weather gets hotter, you know what that means. No, not that. It's time for some cold noodles. Korean cold noodles are a staple summer dish due to the fact that it's typically enjoyed ice cold, so it cools you down during the hot, sweltering summers. I will be basing today's cold noodles off of the one seen in Eternal Return. Made with ramen and ice water, this bowl of cold noodles comes topped with what looks like brisket, Korean radish, and a hard-boiled egg. Incredibly simple. Just a reminder to hit that subscribe button to see more food from Eternal Return, and also check me out on Twitch. Links are in the description below. But without further ado, let's begin. The first thing is the broth. Begin by peeling a Korean radish. You can substitute a daikon if that's easier to find though. After peeling, cut the radish into rounds and then into chunks. The shape and size doesn't really matter for this because it's all going into the broth and then strained afterwards. Make sure to save a portion of the radish for the toppings later though. Next up is an onion. Peel the onion and cut into chunks and add it with the radish. Peel about 4 to 5 cloves of garlic and then take the knife and smash the garlic. This allows for the garlic to better release its flavor and aromatics into the broth. Peel about a 2-inch knob of ginger. Using a spoon is an easy way to peel ginger root, albeit a bit messy. Cut the ginger into long planks to increase that surface area for the broth. Finally, chop a green onion into chunks, and that completes all of the aromatics that are going into the broth. As I mentioned earlier, there is a beef brisket in the Eternal Return version. Clean and cut off some of the fat from the beef brisket. This step is optional but allows for a cleaner broth as you don't have to remove as much fat rising to the top during the cooking process. Moving over to the stove in a large pot, add the aromatics, then place the beef brisket on top. Cover with water and add whole peppercorns. Set the heat onto high and bring to a boil and then let it simmer for about an hour on medium-low. After an hour has passed, add either soy sauce or salt to season the broth and turn off the heat and leave on the stove for 10 minutes. Strain the broth and this is what it should look like. Mine is a little bit dark though, due to the fact that I use soy sauce instead of salt. So if you use salt, yours will be a bit lighter. Give it a taste and add more seasonings if you need. I added a touch of sugar and more salt before calling it good. Let it sit and come down to room temperature, then pour it into a fridge-safe container and either put it in the freezer if you want to eat this dish right away, or put it in the fridge if you're preparing the broth ahead of time. Regardless, the broth must be ice cold for this dish. Now that the broth is done, let's look at the various toppings. Taking the saved portion from earlier, cut the radish into thin planks. I'd say maybe a few centimeters thick. It kind of reminds me of playing cards. For the pickling, I'm doing a shortcut, very quick pickling liquid, vinegar, sugar, and salt, and a bit of water. Stir to dissolve the solids and then let the radish pickle in the liquid. The next topping is the beef brisket. Cut the beef brisket as thin as the radish, if not thinner. Try to detect where the grain is of the brisket and cut against it. This means finding the direction of the muscle fibers are going and cutting perpendicular and separating those muscle fibers. It allows for a more tender chew. Now for the final topping, bring a pot of water to a boil and boil a few eggs. The image shows hard boiled, so I will be doing 10 to 11 minutes in the water. Go 7 to 8 minutes for a more medium boil if that's your preference. After the time has passed, dunk the eggs into ice cold water to stop the cooking process. Now that the toppings are done, only one final part to tackle: the noodles. Noodles used in cold noodle dishes are typically made with either buckwheat or sweet potato starch. Most Asian markets will sell these noodles in their dry section. Bring a pot of water to a boil and cook according to the package instructions. It varies depending on what type of noodles and which package you end up buying. Once the noodles are cooked, dunk them into cold water and run it under cold water until the noodles are ice cold. Now the time has come to assemble. Start with the noodles at the bottom. Add a few pieces of the beef brisket to create a layer of meat. Place the pickled Korean radish into a staggered stack, half of a hard-boiled egg, and finally ladle the ice-cold broth until it reaches near the top of the noodles. And that completes this refreshing summer dish. Besides the broth, this is a very simple dish to make, and you can even find pre-made broth at Asian markets if you want to eat this dish quick and easy. I stay true to what Eternal Returns version was, but when I eat cold noodles, I typically enjoy a bit of heat, so I'm adding kimchi before I enjoy. I hope that y'all enjoyed the video. Please remember to subscribe for more food content, and let me know in the comments if there are any other consumables from Eternal Return that you'd like to see. I'll see y'all in the next one.